This video started with one program. This program, specifically. When I went to see Mean Girls, I went and I bought myself this program. Now, I'm going to show you inside of this program. This program is mostly consisting of cast bios. There is one article about the Savoy Theatre. There is a brief one-page writer's note from Tina Fey. There is a double-page spread of rehearsal photos. But other than that, this program is consisting of information about the cast, information about the producers, and advertisements. Knowing all of that, knowing the contents that find themselves within this program, how much do you think it's worth? If you ask me, maybe £5, £6 at a push. This program costs £10. Just to contrast that, this program is Back to the Futures. This cost, if I remember correctly, about £8. You can tell the difference between the size, and you can tell the difference between the content within. Inside this program, there are massive double-page spreads of production photos, high quality images. There are several massive articles going into depth about the creative process of bringing this show to life. If I held both of these programs towards you and asked you which ones you think cost more money, you would say this one, but in reality, it's this. And so as I sat there at Mean Girls, not reading through the program because there just wasn't enough content within it and just staring at the stage, it made me think. Despite the inconsistencies, despite the issues that are evident with programs, I will still consistently, every single show I go to, buy a program. Why? I can't count on my hands the amount of times I have been disappointed with a program, but still nonetheless, I will buy one every single time. So what is it about a program that leads me to buying it? And so this video was born. Today I'm going to take an unhinged deep dive into UK programs. I'm going to explore what they are, what they contain, the inconsistencies, the pros, the cons, alternatives, and answer the question once and for all. What is the problem with UK programs? But if you haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Ellie, I talk about theatre. I am the most chaotic theatre person on the internet. I do reviews, I do discussions, I do versus brackets, news and rankings, and if any of that sounds interesting to you, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps out the channel. But let's dive in to UK programs. So, if you do not live in the UK, you may be asking yourself, what is a program? Almost every show that you go to in the UK will have a program for sale. These are little booklets full of information all about the show. They may include articles, they may include cast bios, they may include photos, and a lot of the time, they will include ads. Programs can range from all different sizes, all different shapes, all different lengths. This one is notoriously large. Most commonly in the UK, programs will set you back about £5 to £10, with that price becoming higher and higher for souvenir programs like this one, which range drastically from page length, as you can tell, to content within. But in the UK, we do not have a free version of a program. You may be familiar with something like the Broadway Playbill, which is given out for free at shows. However, the UK does not do this. The only theatre that comes to mind that does something similar is the National Theatre. However, that is a single page of information. An A4 sheet of paper that's folded 3 times into a tiny little booklet and only contains the basic information. Who's in the cast, who produced it, who's on the crew. So in the UK, if you don't want to look at the screens in the foyer to find out the cast or take a photo of that, you need to buy one of these. Most shows will offer a program like this, but other shows will also offer a brochure. Some shows will only offer the big version, and that's where a lot of frustration comes, because every show, every set of producers will produce a different program, different size, different shape. And when you walk into a show and the only offering they have is a large souvenir brochure like this, you're spending up to £15 to £20 on a brochure that you don't know whether the contents of are going to be worth that price point. So that's what I sought to find out first. What are the common frustrations with programs? What are the ones that I have and what are the ones that you have? So throughout this video, I'm going to refer back to several points of information. Some of this information has been sourced from Instagram. I asked people on Instagram. The people who follow me on Instagram are going to be very much from a theatrical background. They're going to be people who are most likely going to be visiting the theatre consistently, or at least have a basic understanding and a basic love of theatre. So all of my data sets are going to reflect this. It's going to be less about general public and more people who have a stronger passion and a stronger love for theatre. So across theatre fans, what are the most common frustrations with programs? Well, when I asked this, the most common problem cited was the inconsistent sizing. I've been trying to illustrate this as I've been showing programs in this video, but a program can be this big, a program can be this big, a program can be this big, a program can be A4 sized. A program can be square. A program can be an even bigger square. And you can start to see how if you collect these things, there's absolutely no way that you can display these or keep these in a consistent way. And it's not even like there's consistency within brands. This is an ATG program from Cabaret. This is also an ATG program. This is also an ATG program. And guess what? This program also from ATG. So no matter what theatre you're going to, even if they are owned by the same people, you can find yourself with 4 to 5 to 6 to 70 million different sizes of programs. And that makes collecting these things really, really frustrating. I would love to be able to display my programs properly. I would love to be able to dedicate an entire shelf to them. I would love to be able to display them up on my walls, frame some of them, but the inconsistent sizing means I will never be able to do this. Inconsistent sizing made up 27% of the overall response to this question, with an additional 10% being that the programs were too big, leading to the overall average of the response to this question being about the size of programs. Another large chunk of frustrations with programs came from the cost of them. I feel like cost would be less of an issue if, again, it was more consistent across the board. But it's very easy as you start to look into it to see why people have this complaint. I asked people, what is the most expensive program you have seen? A lot of responses said £15. I had some responses going up to £18, £20. Knowing that I'm someone who, when I go to see a show, I buy rush tickets, I buy cheaper tickets, I buy tickets up in the gods. I'm spending about £20 to £25 on theatre tickets. The programs are essentially becoming about as expensive as the tickets that I would normally get. And with everything right now rising in cost, people start to notice. This program was £12. This program was £15. This program was £8. This program was around £5 or £6. With such variety of costs within all of these, people will notice, especially when they land on the higher end, and especially for programs like this, when this is your only option. So unfortunately, it's not surprising that cost is something that a lot of people have noticed and become more frustrated with. Another one of the large frustrations people had was ads. And the frustration with ads is very understandable. When you've spent a lot of money on a program, you kind of want to get your money's worth out of it. And if you're opening up and flicking through and you're seeing, even if it's only a certain percentage, if you're seeing a lot of ads in quick succession, it feels like you're not quite getting what you've paid for. There's a lot of smaller things that people have raised as well. Too many photos, a lack of photos. Venues that offer both a program and a brochure, or maybe you feel like you need to buy both, or you're missing out on things if you don't buy both. Content that doesn't feel exclusive, especially when you can find all of the cast bios online. Not enough articles, no information about the covers. Feeling like programs can be easily damaged, especially when you've paid upwards towards £12, £15 on them. Case in point, my Cabaret program is slightly damaged here. Because, guess what? This was too big to fit in my bag. And with all those frustrations, I also wanted to ask why. Why do you buy a program? What draws you most to a program? Most consistently, people answered that they are looking for the cast and crew bios, but they're also looking for a memory. Especially with theatre fans, this makes a lot of sense. You want to remember the shows you're going to. You want to go back in 10 years, pick up a Billy Elliot programme, flick through the pages, and see that your Billy is now an absolute Hollywood superstar. And I use this as an example because yes, you can. Down the bottom there, that's Leighton Williams. And right in the middle there, that is a young Tom Holland. There's a lot of novelty being able to go back to these old programs and to find cast members you forgot were in it. And these hold a lot of memories. Billy Elliot was one of the first shows I went to see. It was 2014, the show was starting to come towards an end, and I remember really, really loving this show. Having this program still, to this day, holds a lot of really fantastic memories for me. And being able to look back through it and look back at the memories of it is fantastic. So it makes sense that a lot of people want to remember these shows. And I think the response about displaying the programs also shows and underlines the frustration about inconsistencies, because you want to have these, you want to display these. Especially if you have a program that's signed, for instance, you want to be able to show this off. And if you can't find a good enough frame for it, if you can't find a good place to put it on a shelf, it kind of is a bit pointless. Other high points that people reflected on was photography. People want to look at high resolution images of the productions. People want articles to look through. People want this exclusive information. People want these as well to create those memories, to get them signed. But the biggest question I wanted to ask was this: how satisfied are you with programs? And I was very shocked by results. I expected it to be a lot more 50-50, but on the whole, people are generally satisfied with programs. About 40% of the people who answered the poll answered with a negative amount, that they were satisfied with programs from 0% to 50% of the time. But the majority of people answered that they're satisfied with programs 50 to 75% of the time, which very much feels in line with what I would say. I would say that on the whole, I will most often be satisfied with a program, with what they deliver, but there is definitely a strong percentage of times where I look over a program and am very disappointed. Not naming any names here. We won't name any names. I won't name any names of programs that were very disappointing. And finally, with this information, I wanted to ask about programs and brochures. We're seeing more and more that shows will offer one or the other or both. So, how likely are you to get both? I find that I'm not. If I really, really like a show, and like I've been multiple times, I will get the bigger brochure. Case in point, Come From Away, my favourite musical of all time. I bought the brochure. This is very rare for me. I will only tend to get the brochure if it's the only thing that's available, like for shows like Hello Dolly, Kiss Me Kate, Back to the Future, Cabaret. And it looks like people generally agree. 60% of people said they're unlikely to buy both. 32% said they are likely, and 7% of people said that they would get neither. Looking at those results, knowing that these are people who are most likely to be the most engaged with this show, it is kind of shocking that if they offer both, it is unlikely that most theatre fans will get both. So, on the whole, we can kind of see from this information that programs are generally well regarded. There's a lot of issues and there's a lot of inconsistencies, and people do have their common frustrations. As an average, people are mostly happy with programs. And despite their flaws, people will go out and get programs for the memories, for the information, for the additional things that it can provide to the theatre-going experience. But that did lead me into the question, because it's all well and good saying what do you think about programs, but let's actually find out and dive into what programs actually contain. You may say it's a bit extra. I definitely think it's a bit extra. However, it was important for science that I did this. I went through every single program I have from this year, plus any program from a show that is currently still in the West End and the program is recent enough, or any show that has closed in the West End but is currently on tour. This led to 78 programs. I went for the pages one by one of all 78 of these programs and analysed every single one. Yes, I put a lot of time into this video. Why'd you ask? The 4 categories are thus. Number 1, information. This is the basic basic information that you need from a show. Your cast bios, your crew bios, song lists, just basic information about the show. Doesn't really tell you much about the show, just tells you the basic things you need to know. This is often the information that you'll find most likely online, if you look it up, or dotted around the theatre on screens that you could easily take a photo of if you didn't want to buy a program. Next, I checked for full pages of ads. I won't explain what an ad is. I feel like it's pretty obvious what an ad is. I use Adelphi Macintosh programs here because there is a huge outlier to this, and that's these pages. These pages are for shows that you are currently not seeing, but they provide enough information about that show and are an interesting enough read to kind of blur the lines between ad and the next category, article. I opted to put these, though, into article because there's enough information here and enough to read through that it feels substantive on its own, even though it is advertising another show. An article is any write-up about the show, about the theatre you're seeing, about maybe even, in some cases, another show. Detailed information going into the background of the show. Most of the time these are written by dramaturgs who research the political standings that the shows take place in, the years, the eras, locations, and provide an additional extra input on the show you're about to see. These can be really, really useful, and these are the things that I am most looking for in a program. I want to know more about the background. I want to know more about where this show takes place. I want to know about the history. I want to know about the production design. These can also include things like articles from members of the production team, designers who worked on the set, the costume, the lighting, to give you an extra glimpse of what the process of the show was like. And finally, the final category is photos. I'm looking for any full page of photos. These can be rehearsal photos, or these can be production photos taken during the actual show. Something to note, though, is that some programs are printed pre-opening. A program like Stranger Things here, I went to see during previews, which means that a more recent program may have some more production photos, but when this was printed, the production photos hadn't been taken yet. Nonetheless, they can still include rehearsal photos, which Stranger Things does in large amounts. Now, some things blur the lines a little bit. That's definitely a production photo, yes, but the majority of the page is taken up by the articles. I'm counting pages that are fully photos here. So these two pages, they're an article. However, these two spreads of pages are photos. With that said, I analysed all of those programs and these are the results. Not separating programs and brochures, I analysed 3,269 pages. And when I averaged out all the different pieces of information I looked through, I found that programs had an average of 41.9102561. Okay, maybe I should round up to the decimal point. That would be helpful. Programs had an average of 41.9 pages. The average of ads, 7.06. The average of photos, 5.89. The average of articles, 10.04. The average pages of information, 18.92. When I separated the programs that I sorted into brochure and the programs I sorted into being regular programs, which if you still don't really know the difference, this is a brochure, it's got more pages, it's got more photos, it's a lot bigger and a lot more expensive, and this is a program, smaller. That's the difference. Yes, these were the averages between the two. I'm going to round them all up because the decimals are making my head hurt. But there's about 2 less ads in brochures, which makes a lot of sense because you're spending a lot more money and there's a lot more information that brochures will give. But on the whole, the average amount of information is about the same. The average amount of articles is about the same, only 1 more on average in brochures. The biggest changes, the biggest outliers, is the amount of pages, which makes sense. Brochures tend to be a bit longer, the average of brochures being 48 pages versus the 40 pages that normal programs have. The biggest outlier, photos. We see that the average number of photos goes massively down here. from about 4 photos in a normal program to 12 pages of photos in brochures. We can take this as a general guide to show that if you really want to pick between a program and a brochure, if you want really good photos, that's when you go for brochures. If you want more pages, that's when you go for brochures. But other than that, you can really pick and choose between, and most of the time you'll get the same amount of detail. But if it's information you're looking for, if it's articles, and if you're looking for like less ads, it doesn't really matter that much. Saying that, that is the average. There were a lot of programs in here that had no ads, like this Addams Family program, but that is also due to the cost of these programs and the concept programs being fairly expensive. And it was fairly consistent on the whole that the more expensive the program, the less likely you were to see ads. Another thing I tracked was size, how big the program was. Obviously, I have shown how inconsistent sizing is, but how inconsistent is it? Out of my program collection, I found the majority of programs were A5 sized. So, the majority of programs fit about this size, with 36 of the programs being this size. The next biggest size being A4. I picked up the wrong size program here, just pretend it's an A4 size, shh. With A4 programs taking up 21 out of the 78 programs. Next, with about 5 or 6 to each one, was the other sizes, with about 5 being a large brochure size, about 6 being a booklet, which I defined being and specifically having a spine and being larger than an A4 program. About 6 programs which were square, which honestly, this is a size that annoys me the most because how am I meant to put this on a shelf? It's going to be poking out. Why do you do this? It's a really lovely program. I love this program a lot. It has great information, but also the sizing. Why is it square? And then 2 programs being a very big square, which honestly, I've just moaned about the small squares, but these ones, no, these are worse. Which is annoying because the content's really good in this one. It's just I don't like the size. So you can see, yes, there is a lot of different categories of sizes of programs. Yes, there is no consistency across the board, but there is still a clear winner when it comes to the most consistent size, which is A5. And also there was like 2 that were under A5 size, but I mean, I thought I'd tell you that. It's not that important. It's fine. The most consistent brand for programs I found in the West End was Delphic Macintosh. Every program I own that is a Delphic Macintosh program is this size. Now, a lot of their theatres do offer a souvenir brochure size as well, which isn't reflected in the dataset here, but important to note. But all of their programs are at this size, A5, with a nice bind to make it decent to put on a shelf. And all following a basic structure at the front of the program being about the show, going into the cast bios, and then the back of the program being ads for other Delphic Macintosh productions, but actually offering a lot of information about them. Articles that you could probably find in the programs for those shows themselves. These were really strong programs, and programs I regard really highly. Lloyd Webber also has a very similar way of doing programs. A lot of the programs are set out like this. They're just slightly smaller than A4, which is annoying, but I've classed them as A4 anyway, because they're about that size. See, even within the consistencies, there's inconsistencies. What are programs? And honestly, these ones I really enjoy. They have a very clear visual design, immediately letting you know that they are from that brand of theatres. Good information both about the show and the theatre. However, the problem is that not every Lloyd Webber theatre follows this. The Adelphi is also a Lloyd Webber theatre, but because they co-own it with Nederlander, it doesn't have the iconic Lloyd Webber branding on it. And there's a lot of similarities within the actual content inside. But as you can tell, the sizing is completely different. And then there's also if you go and see something at the London Palladium, where most likely they are only offering this size of programme. So even though Lloyd Webber do have consistencies a lot across the board, they're also very inconsistent as well. ATG is a really iconic design that, for some reason, the Harold Pinter just does not want to follow. Which is fun, because their touring venues follow this very similar format. And yes, maybe pricing is a bit weird between them, but most of the time they are A5. I say most of the time because Stranger Things doesn't follow this format. Cabaret doesn't follow this format. The Harold Pinter loves square programs, and I don't know why. Every single show I see at the Harold Pinter has a square program. And it's like, why? What? You're an ATG theatre. Why is it inconsistent? I need to interview someone who makes programs at the Harold Pinter to find out why they're square. Did Harold Pinter just really like square programs? Is it because of him? I mean, the theatre's named after him, but he never owned it. Why are they square? The most inconsistent programs were definitely the off West End, which makes a lot of sense. Because I lumped a lot of their data together, just because they're all off West End venues, it kind of led to a slightly messy result. Because, you know, the other Palace and Southwark Playhouse are completely different venues, but both are off West End. There's not really much correlation between the two. But the most disappointing was touring programs. Touring programs had a lot of the lowest numbers across the board. When I averaged it all out, my touring programs and programs from regional venues had 1.5 photos on average, had 5.4 pages of articles, and had the least amount of pages as well, with only 31.8 pages on average. So that's the overview of information, but there are a lot of outliers, and because of this, there are some programs that stand high and above as like really strong programs, and programs that are a little bit weaker when you look at the actual content within. It's been my punching bag through this whole video, so it makes sense that I keep it here. The Mean Girls program was one of the most disappointing. I haven't really taken price into account, but it would definitely be a negative about this one as well. It's a lot of information that you'll find on the website. It's a lot of cast bios, it's a lot of that, and it's good, but there's just not enough within it to really justify it as a program. I want more articles, I want more information, I want more details about the process of bringing Mean Girls to stage. I want details about the set design, the projection. There's more that they could definitely put within this program. And I don't know if now that they have their souvenir brochure and they've been in the West End a little bit longer, if they have improved this by now, because this program was, to their credit, bought in August of 2024. A lot of the touring venue programs are very disappointing. Both of these just being cast bios. I don't think either of these have a single page of information about the show itself, which is a real shame. Because when I look into a program like this, a show like Rocky Horror, which has 50 years of history about it, it is really disappointing that the first page you look onto is cast bio, and then you go into more cast bio, and then it's more cast bio. There's a lot more that you could have done with something like this one. And similar things can be said about the Jesus Christ Superstar one, which doesn't really feature much information about the show. Mary Poppins is definitely the weakest when it comes to the Alfred Macintosh programs, as when it comes to information, it's only really this double-page spread, and there's not many photos, and most of it, the large majority of it, is these cast bios. And there's a handful of off-West End programs which I do really enjoy, but feel like they're lacking again with the articles, and that's what I'm really looking for when I'm looking at a program. But I've spoken about the ones I was disappointed in. What were the strongest programs? And I think by and far, the strongest program in my collection, the most articles and the best percentage, Guys and Dolls at the Bridge Theatre. This program, first of all, I will mention its size, very annoying, but at least the Bridge is consistent with its inconsistency. Every program you get at the Bridge is this size, so at least there's that. But the majority of this program, a large percentage of this program, is really interesting articles about New York in the 30s, about crap games, about Guys and Dolls and the history of that musical itself. There's I think the percentage was there was about 30 pages just dedicated to articles in this program, which is by and far the best out of every program I analysed. This was a really good program. There were also multiple programs that were more souvenir-led that were really strong. The Operation Mincemeat one is a really good example of this. This program specifically dives into the making of the musical. It has a really interesting production history. It has really interesting history that they've dove into to actually create the show. It has a lot of really great photos in there. It's a really interesting program. And a great additional piece for fans of Operation Mincemeat. And since I got this program, they have added even more to it, as they've continued producing the show, as they have learnt more and more about the characters featured in the show. Come From Away is another great one, which features a lot more about the history of the event that is covered in Come From Away. Gives you so many amazing cast photos from the show. This is a really strong souvenir brochure. I really enjoyed the Two Strangers one. Some great moments, even platforming the understudies in the show, which isn't always common to see. Really, really lovely to see them get the spotlight here as well. And additionally, this is a program that means a lot to me because it's opening night, has the sticker, and was given out for free as well. I don't know if they sold this before. I think this was a show where this was counted as their souvenir brochure, but don't take my word on that. Spirited Away, really strong program. Not just because of the content within it. I could literally slam this across your head and it would probably knock you out. That's how heavy this one is. But it's a well-designed program. Really, really beautiful. So much information about the history of Spirited Away, about the context and things that may be slightly lost on English speakers watching the show. Talking about the importance of names within there and how the Japanese characters, add a lot to the meaning of the story of Spirited Away. And yes, the majority of this program is cast bios, but they are accompanied by literally entire pages of photos for each of these performers, really allowing every single person in this cast to have a proper page of information about them. The Starlight Express program, again, because this is opening night, this was given out for free. Normally these are about £15, but they were free, which is great. And these programs are fantastic. So many photos within them of the cast rehearsing, history on Starlight Express itself. Really great design in here, loads and loads of information, loads of sketches. If you're a fan of Starlight Express, this is a great program to have. And it's really interesting that as I reflect on the strongest programs, a lot of them are the brochures, despite the fact that I'm not always someone who goes for the brochures. But they contain a lot of really great information, a lot of really great articles that really, really intrigue me. If we're looking smaller, something like Mousetrap is really good. They actually have their main cast information separate to the program. I don't know if that is still the case, but they give you this little booklet which contains the cast bios and everything, but the program itself is mostly just information about the history of the show. Obviously, this is the longest running show in the West End, 73 years I think they're up to now. So it tells you a lot about the original cast and different moments through the history, talks about the design. There's loads of really good information in here. So you can kind of tell that when I'm looking at my favorite programs, these are the ones that contain the most information, the most additional content, and really build upon your experience of the show. But the other question is, okay, I've looked at programs. All of these programs are from around 2023, 2024. How has this changed? Now, the oldest program in my collection is the Billy Elliot one I showed you earlier, which is from 2014. Yes, things have changed. Yes, if you look at the price of the Billy Elliot program, you go, oh, I wish. Oh, I wish. Yes, that program cost me £6 back in 2014. That program would likely cost me $15 now. Oh boy. So obviously, I couldn't really dive much into the programs that I had, so I asked some friends. I asked my friends to do exactly what I did with these programs. And what's really interesting, it's fairly consistent still. When I took these older programs, which had a massive range in time periods from like the 70s, going into the 80s and the 90s, some of these being from the 2000s, the average page, about the same. There was an average of 39.9 pages, which is one page less than the data set of just programs from the modern day. Around 9 ads, just a little bit more than programs now. Roughly the same amount of information with 19.5 pages of information. Matching fairly consistency to about the 18 pages of content that we found from modern programs and modern brochures. Articles did take a little bit of a decline here, with 7 pages of articles versus the modern programs, which had about 10. And photos being fairly consistent as well. I will add, though, the caveat of the fact that if I get rid of the more modern programs from this old collection, there was a couple from the 2000s, like a Wicked one and a Legally Blonde one. If you get rid of those, the percentage of photos does go down quite significantly. A lot of the programs that we had for this set of information did not feature any photos at all, which is probably the biggest change when it comes between old and new programs. So over time, the only thing that's really changed is price, and that's just mostly due to inflation and the fact that, you know, our economy is great at the moment. So even between time periods, between brochures and programs, between different companies, the data is fairly consistent. The biggest inconsistencies coming from different companies themselves, and less so the type of program. So this does beg the question. Programs, fairly consistent, but there are still a lot of inconsistencies about them. The content is not really the problem here. The data showing that the majority of programs mostly contain information, mostly on average contain strong articles. I could maybe do a little bit better on photos maybe, and could maybe include a few less ads. But what do other countries have? Let's return to playbills. This is a Broadway playbill. If you go and see a show on Broadway, you get given a playbill for free. And a lot of people would much prefer playbills. When I surveyed my community and asked a simple question, would you like to see UK theatres introduce a playbill? The vast majority of people said yes. And it's very easy to see why over 70% of my audience would like to see playbills implemented in the UK. Number one, they are free. They are easy to keep little memoirs of the show. So if you're looking for something that is just going to give you a little basic memory of who was in the show, this is all you really need. They're great for photos in the theatre. You want to snap a photo of this with the stage? It's perfect. It's got the title of the show. It's got the theatre you're in. Bada bim, bada boom, there you go. They're great souvenirs, they're easy to collect because of the consistent sizing. Every single Broadway theatre having this size playbill, having the consistent design. And the size makes them easy to collect, the size makes them easy to display. There's a lot of pros with these. However, these are very, very different to a UK program. And that shows when I do the exact same type of analysis on these as I did with all of my programs. As you can see from this data here, the pie chart is very different to all of the UK programs. You can tell the majority of the content in a playbill is advertisement. This Gatsby one that I have is mostly ads. Every other page, I'm pretty sure, is an ad if I show you. There's an ad. Oh, look, another ad. Oh, look, another ad. Oh boy, is that an ad? Yes, it is. Oh my God, it's an ad. And that makes sense. These are free. You've got to pay for them somehow. So having a larger percentage of ads is kind of the give and take that you get with these. The information is fairly consistent when I analyze these two playbills. When you get a playbill, you do get a full cast list and a crew list and producers list of who's in the show and who worked on it, alongside a page of musical numbers as well. And these are very simple. They're here, they're doing the job. There is a page of headshots as well, which is very iconically laid out. But when it comes to information, that's all you're really gonna get. There are articles, and the articles are shared between every single playbill, changing out monthly. At the front of the playbill, you will have a couple of pages about different shows. Think very much how the back of the Delphic Macintosh programs have ads towards other Delphic Macintosh shows, but written up as articles. Very similar in a playbill. But unless it just so happens that there's a Gatsby article going around the playbills every month, you're not going to see any specific articles in here about the show that you're going to see. And that's a huge loss of information that is really, really valuable. As you can tell, all of the programs that I have shared that I really, really enjoyed and found the strongest programs were the ones that had a strong amount of articles. And that's something you just don't get in a playbill. And you'll notice from both of the playbills I analyze, there's no photos. No production photos, no rehearsal photos. The only photo you have is the basic one you need to get your photo of the stage with. So while people really do want to see playbills, there's a lot that we would lose if these were introduced over programs. And the biggest thing about that is that I don't think that would ever happen in the UK. Programs make too much money. Programs are a great money investment for producers. And at the end of the day, they are the people who will decide whether we will have playbills or not. And if a system is benefiting them as much as programs benefit producers, and on the whole, people are mostly happy with programs, there's not really much want or reason to introduce playbills. You would have to have consensus across the entire board of London Theatre. You would need to have SALT get involved, essentially, to have all these producers consistently agree to offer some kind of free playbill. And as far as they're concerned, there's already alternatives to this. Almost every single West End show you go to, there is a cast list in the foyer that you can look at. If you don't want to buy a program, but you want to know who's in the cast and who's on that specific day, go look at the cast board. It's up there for you. You don't need to pay anything. And I think a question on producers' minds would be, if we introduce playbills or something like a playbill, who is going to buy the programs? So I asked you, the most engaged theatre fans, if we brought over playbills and still we had programs, would you buy one? And yes, the majority of people said that they would still likely buy one, but still only by 57%. And that, again, is coming from my audience, people who are very engaged with theatre. If you are a more general theatre-going audience and you're going to see a show, and you know that sat on your seat is already the basic information that you need for the show, you're kind of not going to want to buy a program as well. There's a lot of pros to playbills, but there's also cons, and there's a lot of cons for producers as well. And that's the sad push and pull here. Because at the end of the day, they're the people who would need to benefit from this in order to introduce a giant change to the UK theatre system like this would be. And what's more, if it was a case where we were going to have both, it would likely become very true that programs would become even more expensive. I think if we ever introduced that, this type of program would completely disappear, and it would only be the souvenir brochures, and they would be a lot more expensive. A lot more expensive. Because we do see this on Broadway. Some Broadway shows will offer a souvenir program as well. But this type of program, very rare on Broadway. Because essentially, this free little dog sit of information is competing. And that's the biggest problem with playbills and bringing playbills over instead, is the competition, is the lack of need for it. And if majority of theatregoers are happy with the current system, why change it? Neither of these systems are perfect. Playbills are not perfect. Programs are not perfect. And I'll defend programs a lot, even if I have to sit through reading for a program where I'm very disappointed with what's being delivered in it. Because on the whole, I will have great programs. I will have programs that deliver some really fantastic information, that provide additional insight into the piece of art I am watching. And that's fantastic to see. So I'm a little bit conflicted. I would love playbills. I would love something like this that people can just have for free. I would even love something simpler than a playbill, even if we had more theatres offer a free cast list, like the National Theatre does. Because I feel like if we introduce playbills, specifically playbills, I would very much miss the information that I get from a programme. I feel like even with the inconsistencies, a programme is worth it. And that's what's really interesting. And that's what I wanted to dive into finally. Because, yes, playbills would be great. A free version of a program would be fantastic, but programs nonetheless have a strong hold on the UK theatre-going scene. So why? How do you find out why? You ask people what their favourite program is. I had a wide range of answers to this, because I found that despite all of the programs I mentioned, some of my favourite programs of all time weren't even ones that I analysed. Some of my favourite programs are linked to memories. Maybe I visited Stage Door afterwards and got the cast to sign it. These memories, these people, loads of people within the cast of these shows have become massive names now. And having these in the future to be able to display, even if I have to deal with the inconsistent sizing, is absolutely worth it. Maybe it's a program for a show that you never thought you'd be able to see live. A show that means a lot to you. A show that you grew up listening to and finally you were able to see it live. And because of that, there's so many wonderful memories attached to it. Maybe you remember a certain time in your life. Maybe you remember where you were at this point and the joys and the highs and lows of that moment, not even attached to the show. Maybe it's less so about the show itself and more the joy of it and how they have taken the ideas of a program and kind of flipped them on their head. You know, maybe they've come up with a creative approach of doing it, something that feels very genuine to the specific production, and for that it really stands out in your mind. Or maybe it's a show that is just one of the first things you saw in London. Maybe it's a show that ignited a love for theatre, and while it's not your favourite show anymore, while it's a show that you can kind of see the flaws in now, it's a show that will always mean a lot to you, and you remember exactly where you were when you were a teenager and you went to see this, and that ignited that love, and that ignited that passion, and that ignited that feeling of, oh, I'm close enough to London, I can go visit shows, I can go on my own. Maybe it's something like that. It's memory. Memory is what makes these very important. And I mean, it doesn't really matter whether you have a program for that. You can have the exact same feeling with one of these, if it's less so about the actual content within it and more so about how that show made you feel. And when I asked you guys, I asked why. I asked for your favorite program and why. And honestly, there's some really sweet answers here. The most common reason? Photography. Looking back at the casts in shows, looking back at the people who were in it, some people mentioned size. Some people mentioned that it's just the perfect size program and that's why I really loved this one. Some people said it was affordable. Maybe, you know, we're looking at the cost of programs and these things going up, but sometimes you look at the cost of a program and look at the value it gives, and when they match, that really does stand out to you. Because yes, a program can be really expensive, but it can also contain all of the perfect information inside to make it worth that cost, especially if it's a show that's important to you. A lot of people mentioned looks and quality. Some people mentioned a lack of ads as well, going into the content inside and just saying, I really appreciated how they delivered this one. Sometimes it wasn't even about the program itself. Sometimes it was about the cast in there. The covers were really well served and given time to shine within that program. Sometimes it's about the articles information involved and the quality of those. But a large majority of people mention signed programs. It makes them more special. It reminds them of a time in their life, the memory attached to this booklet. And yes, a lot of these things are things that will either not be replicated by programs or will be. Photography, articles, quality, things that can't be replaced by playbills, but getting things signed, the memory of it, are things that can be. At the end of the day, programs are here to stay. Whether you like that or not, this system works for the most part. I think there's definitely improvements that companies can make. And even if we couldn't have something like playbills, it would be great to have a lot more consistency between these different programs from these venues. A universal size. There's pros and cons to both systems, but at the end of the day, programs will always mean a lot to me because the memory attached to them, because of the importance of these shows in my life, because of all of these reasons that will always make me forgive a program that comes along and disappoints me. But what do you think? What's your favourite program you've ever bought? And what are some changes to UK programs that you would like to see implemented? And do you think that the UK would be better off if we implemented a system like playbills? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps the channel. Here's some links to some other videos on the screen right now and a link to my Instagram if you'd like to drop me a follow over there. There's other social links and a merch store in the description down below. But that's it for me today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.